Very few resumes resemble the one belonging to Dan Rooney. PGA golf professional? Okay. There are hundreds of those. Sports psychologist, an F-16 pilot in the Air National Guard as well. Pretty impressive. But on a trip back from one of his 3 tours of duty in Iraq, Rooney had an epiphany. Combined the 2 things he loved most, golf and country, to properly honor the heroes that serve our nation.
I'd like to thank Major Rooney for his service, vision, and leadership of the Folds of Honor Foundation.
He has flown F-16s in Iraq and is also a Class A PGA professional.
What an amazing guy, though. Just being around him, there's so much energy and so many things that he has done with his life and what he wants to do for others as well.
Yeah, and he really makes you feel it. You know, Jimmy, I live here in America, and it's one of the greatest things. I count it as a blessing, and he's the sort of person that really makes you feel that way. It was truly special for me to spend a few hours with him, and we'll see what I did coming up.
Feel good?
Yeah.
You're not going to have any problem.
Thanks, man.
Well done.
That was something else. It really was.
Yeah.
What was this like?
That was 9Gs, and I remember the 9G Club. Apparently very few people can do that without blacking out. No problem for me. I've had worse trips inside my own head.
Ladies and gentlemen, heroes walk among us. They sit next to us on planes like Dan Rooney, who was on a flight and watched a fallen soldier's flag-draped coffin being returned to a family. He decided to raise $3 million to provide scholarships for the children and spouses of fallen and severely disabled service members.
It wasn't too long ago this weekend's holiday in much of the country mostly signified the beginning of the end of golf season. That was until Noonan got Labor Day in his crosshairs. Apparently, being a golf professional and an F-16 fighter pilot left Dan Rooney with just too darn much time on his hands. In just 5 years' time, Rooney has gone from a noble but obscure crusader to an angel of mercy. And Dan Rooney says that Folds of Honor has quickly gone from a mission into a movement.
Some dedicated Americans have figured out a way to turn all those golfers into a resource for families who've paid the ultimate price for their country. NBC's Roger O'Neill has tonight's Making a Difference report.
Professional golfer and retired Top Gun pilot Major Dan Rooney organized what has become the largest grassroots fundraising event in sports history.
He's a fighter pilot and a pro athlete. While on board a commercial airliner in this country, he was moved to tears when he saw a coffin being unloaded bearing the body of a U.S. soldier he never knew. He was also moved to action. And so we choose Major Dan Rooney. After this weekend's golf tournament, he has other plans. He's leaving in a couple of weeks for his 3rd tour of duty in Iraq.
Ladies and gentlemen, Major Dan Rooney.
Thank you all very much. That's supposed to happen at the end. So I have 5 minutes, and my goal is very simple, that you will not forget the next 5 minutes for the rest of your life. And I have a goal, too, that you'll walk out of here with a perspective that'll have a positive impact on every day for the rest of your life. I found when you get up and talk to people, if you tell them a fact, they'll probably learn it. If you tell them the truth, they'll probably believe it. But if you tell them a story, it'll live in their hearts and their minds forever. So I'm honored to be here to share a story with you. If you hang out with me for more than about 5 minutes, you'll hear me use a term. I call it synchronicity. And I define synchronicity as when chance and purpose come together in our lives, when you're at that exact place, at that exact time, and your life is changed. Synchronicity. Think of it as God's messengers, the signs on the highway of life, the people and experiences that are uniquely placed in our paths, hopefully guiding us to our essence, but understanding in the world that we live in more and more every day, there's so many layers that come between us and, for the most part, what's really important. And ultimately understanding that when chance and purpose unite in our lives, it's meaningless unless you have the courage, the faith to take action. So let me explain. Son of a college professor. I grew up in Stillwater, Oklahoma, so a little north of Texas here. Yeah, good place. Not quite Texas, but Oklahoma's a pretty good place. And, you know, my dad always said, hey, son, find your passion in life, whatever you do. And I knew when I was 12 years old that I wanted to be a fighter pilot and a golf professional. Very strange combination. I stand before you as a rare bird, the only guy that put those two things together. And, but what I didn't know is how they would ultimately combine in my life. And I went off to pursue those dreams with a lot of help from a lot of people. And I've done 3 tours of duty in Iraq as an F-16 pilot. Flew most of my combat missions. Thank you. Thank you. Flew most of my combat missions with a fellow pilot, Scott Rookie Rooks. And you may have heard in the intro video, so my call sign, really quick, I'll digress, is Noonan. And so as a fighter pilot, you have no say in your call sign. It is bequeathed to you after your first combat mission. Has anybody seen the movie Caddyshack in here? So Danny Noonan is the main character, so I ended up with Noonan. And for the record, if you ever meet a fighter pilot and they're like, hey, my call sign's Iceman or Maverick, they're a complete tool. It's a self-deprecating bunch. But I went off to Iraq, and I will tell you, I learned firsthand that freedom wasn't free. I saw the real heroes, the Army and the Marines, you know, give their lives, give their limbs for that freedom that we enjoy each and every day. And I felt an incredible calling in my heart from God to do something out of the cockpit, specifically for the families that were impacted through the tragedies in Iraq. And like many things in life, inspiration is only as good as the action that you take. And I came home to my family and my kids, and I did nothing. And it was about 6 months later that I had a defining moment of synchronicity in my life. And it was actually aboard a commercial airline flight. United Flight 664, I was headed from Chicago O'Hare to Grand Rapids, Michigan on a dark, delayed kind of spring night in O'Hare. I finally get on this airplane. As I walk through first class, I see this young corporal, and he's in dress army greens, and I don't think much, but it's a little funny. He's sitting in first class, but figure somebody may have swapped seats with him. And so off I go. I sit in coach, and about an hour later, at this point it's after midnight, we land in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And as we pull up to the gate, the captain comes over the PA and says we have an American hero on board. And there's just enough of a pause to think, you know, what did this young man do in first class? And then he continued very emotionally and said that we have the remains of Corporal Brock Buckland on this flight, who was killed in Iraq, and his identical twin brother, Corporal Brad Buckland, is in first class and has brought him these 7,000 miles home. The captain makes another request that everybody stay in their seats until Corporal Buckland's remains had been removed from the right cargo hold that night. And as an F-16 pilot, I've certainly seen a lot of bad things in combat, but I'd never seen the other side of war. And I sat in that airplane and I watched out the right-hand side, the Bucklands on the darkest night of their lives. His brothers, his sisters, his parents, his 4-year-old son, as that American flag-draped coffin inched down the cargo hold. It was one of the hardest things I'd ever seen. I couldn't help but think about what if that was me, and what would my kids and what would my wife do? And the ceremony finishes itself up, and the honor guard takes Brock's remains away, and I compose myself and wipe away my tears, and I look back to the airplane, and I've never been so disappointed in my entire life with what I witnessed, and that was about half the people had gotten off the plane that night. And there was no place to go except the blanket of freedom we will all sleep under tonight, courtesy of Brock Buckland and the thousands of others that have paid the ultimate sacrifice for our freedoms. And in that moment of synchronicity, when chance and purpose came together in my life, I knew that was God's mission for me. And so I went home to Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, above my garage, and started a foundation called the Folds of Honor. And our mission was very simple when we started out, and that was to help one young boy who was 4 years old at the time, Jacob Buckland, who's 10 now and is our first recipient. And since that point, we've added nearly 4,000 recipients, spouses and kids who've had someone killed or disabled in Iraq and Afghanistan. Thank you. Thank you. We've raised approximately $25 million. There's a guy I think you like a lot in this state. President George W. Bush has been the chairman for Patriot Golf Day, our big national fundraiser for us, and has joined this, little pilot from Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. And we're trying to make this country a better place. And as we sit here today, there are approximately 1 million dependents who've had someone killed or disabled in Iraq and Afghanistan. And of that group, about 85% don't get any federal education assistance. And we've all seen in Washington right now, we're having some issues up there. But I would argue that this isn't a red issue, it's not a blue issue, it is a red, white, and blue issue. And we all have an obligation as free Americans to step up and ensure that we're not leaving families behind on that field of battle. And I'm very proud to announce in closing that we will launch Patriot Range Day, the month of September this year, all across America at shooting ranges in partnership with the NRA and the NSSF. We will give Americans the opportunity to go and shoot and make a donation which will come back to benefit the Folds of Honor Foundation. And I need your help on this. So there's a website, patriotrangeday.com or foldsofhonor.org, and I need everybody in here to stand up and make sure their local range is signed up for the month of September so we can activate and change thousands of more lives together. So as I finish up here, it's been an honor to share a story, my life's mission. I hope it's a few minutes that you'll carry with you in your heart, in your soul as we leave here. Because like my life has demonstrated, when chance and purpose come together, if we don't do anything, it doesn't matter. And I'd like us all to stand and let that 1% that puts on the uniform each and every day in this country know how much the other 99% of us appreciate our freedom. God bless and Godspeed.
Thank you, Major Dan. Thank you for your service.